if you've ever set foot in Lagos, Nigeria, one thing'll hit you right away. There's food everywhere you look. From sunrise on, the streets just explode with the sound of frying and the clanging of wooden spoons in metal pots. Seriously, you can't turn a corner without someone selling something. You got women roasting boli, that's plantain for you newbies, over a wire grill. There's dudes expertly flipping puff-puff in hot oil. And then you got the bukas, those little roadside diners where sweaty workers, impatient motorcycle taxi drivers, okada, and even bankers in suits are all crammed together, sharing plates piled high with jollof rice, efariro, or uedu. But, and I mean but, in the middle of all that craziness, right there in Ikorodu, was this one place that just blew everything else out of the water. I'm talking, once you ate there, you were ruined for any other food. Now it isn't the biggest, fanciest joint, just a simple wooden shack with a yellow door and a cloth banner that read plain as day, Mama Put Best Food in Lagos. At first, it seemed like a bold claim, right? I mean, in a city where everyone thinks their food is the best, what could make this place so special? But here's the kicker. Nobody ever disagreed. Didn't matter if you were loaded or broke. If you found yourself at one of Mama Put's rickety tables and took that first bite, something shifted. Some folks swore her jollof was richer than any party jollof they'd ever had, and that's saying something. Others claimed her pepper soup had healing powers, like it could break a fever, kill a headache, and soothe aching joints. The woman who ran the show was known as Mama Put, but her real name was Iya Yetunde. She was a plump, middle-aged woman with this soft, knowing smile that seemed permanent. Lie etched on her face. Her skin was the color of perfectly roasted peanuts, warm and rich, and her eyes. They had a gentleness that made you feel like you were home. She moved through her shop with this quiet confidence, her hands gracefully serving up perfect portions of rice, soup, and meat. Never too much. Never too little. Her voice was smooth, almost like music. Whether she was shouting out an order or talking to a customer, she always spoke with the warmth of a mother talking to her own. She'd been running that restaurant for over 10 years. People would travel for miles and miles just to get a taste of her cooking. Taxi drivers would take the long way around. Construction workers timed their breaks just right. Even the folks who already had their favorite bukas suddenly found themselves making excuses. Let me just see what all the fuss is about. But once they ate there, they went back to their old spots. And that was the weird thing, you see. It wasn't just about the taste. It was more than that. At first, folks figured it had to be some secret ingredient. Maybe she used some rare pepper or special herbs that gave her food that extra oomph. Thing is, nobody had ever seen her buying ingredients. Other vendors went to the market every morning. You'd see them at mile 12, haggling over sacks of rice, picking out the freshest. How does that sound so far? I'm ready for the next part when you are. But Mama Put, nobody ever saw her lugging baskets or arguing over prices. And her food? It never ran out. Even when the place was jam-packed from morning till night, there was always plenty. Other restaurants had to shut down when their pots were empty, but at Mama Put's, there was always a fresh batch ready, steaming hot, like it had just been cooked. And get this, nobody ever actually saw her cooking. You'd hear the sounds of cooking, the pots clanging, the stew bubbling away. But no one ever caught her in the act, and yet nobody questioned it. I'm telling you, once they tasted her food, it was like they couldn't question it. And the people of Lagos, too busy trying to survive to worry about stuff like that. Even her workers, these young boys and girls running around serving and clearing tables, they didn't know anything either. Nobody pushed it, because as long as they could eat, they didn't care. Take Kunle, for example, a university student struggling to scrape together his fees. He just landed a job at Mama Put's. Kunle was the kind of guy who hated asking for handouts. He'd grown up in a tiny, crowded apartment in Mushin, where privacy was a pipe dream, and survival was a daily brawl. Being the oldest of four, he learned early on that if you wanted something, you had to go out and grab it. His mother, a tired but tough woman, sold vegetables in the market, stretching every naira to keep her kids fed. His father vanished years ago, leaving behind nothing but an old photo and a pile of debts. Kunle wasn't bitter though. That was just life. But right then, life wasn't just hard, it was crushing him. He was in his third year at Lagos State University, studying business administration. School fees were due in a month, and his bank account looked like a bad joke. His mother had sent him what she could, 5,000 naira, but that barely covered transport and meals, never mind tuition. If he didn't pay on time, he'd be forced to drop out, and that was not an option, period. So when he heard Mama Put's kitchen around his classes, Kunle showed up at Mama Put's kitchen a little before 6, wearing a worn-out t-shirt and faded jeans. The place was already buzzing, customers spilling onto the benches outside, chowing down on plates of rice, soup, and meat. A group of Okada riders were huddled by the entrance, tearing into their goat meat. Behind them, a guy in a fancy suit was quietly picking apart some pounded yam. Mama Put's kitchen, man. It was one of those rare spots in Lagos where your status didn't matter. New boy, right? Kunle turned around and saw another young guy, about his age, tying an apron around his waist. He was short, with these sharp eyes. "I'm Emeka," the guy said, handing Kunle an apron, with a lopsided grin and eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Time to get to work, man." Emeka showed him the ropes, how to serve, where to stack the plates, and how to handle the occasional difficult customer. It wasn't back-breaking work, but it was definitely non-stop. The orders kept flooding in, and the customers just kept coming. By 10 o'clock, Kunle was sweating buckets. His arms were killing him from carrying those heavy trays, but the job wasn't all that bad, really. Actually, it was almost too easy. Then, as he was wiping down a table, he heard it. A noise, quiet, almost impossible to notice, coming from the kitchen. It wasn't the usual clatter of pots and pans. This was something else entirely. A soft humming, like a woman singing to herself. The sound of a bucket being moved. The sound of liquid being poured. Kunle turned to Emeka. "Who's still cooking at this hour?" Emeka froze for a second, then forced a smile. "That's just Mama Put." "At this time of night?" Emeka grabbed a tray and walked away. "Just do your job, okay?" Kunle frowned. Something about the way Emeka avoided eye contact made his stomach clench. He turned to Baba Leke, one of the older guys who'd been working there forever. "Baba, what's going on in that kitchen?" Baba Leke looked at him long and hard, then leaned in and whispered, "Never go into the kitchen after dark." The word sent a shiver down Kunle's spine. "Why not?" he asked. Baba Leke just shook his head. "Don't ask questions that don't concern you." Then he stood up and walked off. Kunle tried to brush it off, tried to focus on his work, tried to tell himself it wasn't his business. But the thought kept creeping back into his head. What was Mama Put doing in that kitchen so late? And why didn't anyone else seem to find it weird? By 11:30, the last customer had left and the workers started closing up. Kunle wiped down the last table, glanced at the kitchen door, and felt his pulse jump. The noises were there, the humming, the shifting, the slow, careful pouring. Emeka locked the front door and turned to Kunle. "You can head out now." "You're not staying behind?" Kunle asked. Emeka let out a short laugh. "Stay for what? My shift's over." One by one, the workers left, every single one of them. Nobody stayed. Nobody even looked at the kitchen door. Mama Put was still inside, alone. Kunle hesitated. Then he stepped outside, breathed in the cool night air, and told himself to forget about it. Whatever was happening in that kitchen wasn't his problem. But Kunle barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the humming again. He pictured Mama Put, all alone in the kitchen, pouring something into her pots. He thought about how her food never ran out, about how customers couldn't get enough of it. Something wasn't right, that was for sure. And the worst part, he had to go back too. The next day, because he didn't have a choice, Kunle wasn't the type to get spooked easily. But for the last few months, this feeling had been gnawing at him. He'd been working at Mama Put's long enough to get used to the strange rules. Never go into the kitchen after dark. Never ask where the ingredients came from. Never wonder why the food never ran out. He'd seen how customers acted after eating there, the satisfied look on their faces, the way they became obsessed, and he just ignored it all. But every time he tried to get some sleep, he couldn't shake the image of that kitchen door from his mind. There was something behind it, something he wasn't supposed to see, and the curiosity was eating him alive. Emeka, his coworker, had once joked about the never enter the kitchen after dark rule. If you value your life, just mind your own business, he'd said. Even I never go in there, and I don't plan to. Kunle had laughed it off back then, but now, standing in front of that kitchen door, his heart pounding like a drum and his palms sweating, he wasn't laughing anymore. Because tonight, for the very first time, he was going to break that rule. It was almost midnight. The last plate had been cleared. The last customer had left. Mama Put had already gone home earlier that evening, and the other workers had cleared out too, except for Kunle. He'd stayed behind, pretending to clean up, waiting until the street outside was dead silent. Then he turned to the kitchen door. His hands were shaking as he reached for the handle. He took a deep breath, and slowly he pushed it open. The door creaked open, releasing a wave of hot air thick with the smell of cooking oil, peppers, and something else, something he couldn't quite place. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. At first, everything seemed normal. The giant pots, the wooden spoons, the shelves stacked with plates. But then he saw the bowls, a row of large metal bowls, neatly lined up on the counter, each one filled with a thick, yellowish liquid. At first, he thought it was oil, but something was off. The color was too cloudy. The texture was too watery. Kunle's stomach churned. His mind was screaming at him to get out of there. But then the realization hit him like a punch to the gut, and he almost collapsed. It wasn't oil, it was urine. Mama Put was cooking with her own urine. Kunle clapped a hand over his mouth to keep from throwing up. He stumbled backward, knocking over a wooden stool. The sound echoed through the empty restaurant. He didn't wait to see if anyone had heard him. He turned and ran for his life. For the next 3 days, Kunle didn't go to work. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls from Mama Put, texts from Emeka. Guy, you sick or something? Mama Put's been asking about you. You're not coming to work anymore. He ignored them all. He stayed holed up in his room, barely talking to his roommates. He tried to eat, but he couldn't keep anything down. Rice tasted like sand in his mouth. Gari made him nauseous. Even bread and tea, the easiest thing to eat, felt like chewing cardboard. Nothing satisfied him. And that's when the real horror set in, because there was only one thing his body craved: Mama Put's food. By the 5th day, Kunle felt like he was dying. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. His stomach was twisted in knots. His head was pounding so hard he could barely think. His roommates noticed. Kunle, are you sure it's not malaria? We should take you to the hospital. He waved them off. How was he supposed to explain that the only thing that could cure him was the very thing he was running from? That night, as he lay there sweating and restless, he finally caved. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through his messages until he found the last one from Emeka and typed, "I'm coming to work tomorrow." The next evening, he dragged himself back to the restaurant. His legs felt like jelly. His mouth was as dry as the Sahara. But as soon as he walked through the door, that smell hit him, that familiar, rich, mouth-watering aroma. His stomach rumbled so loud, one of the customers actually turned around to stare. And then he saw Mama Put. She was standing behind the counter, the same soft smile on her face, the same plastic water bottle in her hand. She didn't seem surprised to see him. She didn't even ask where he'd been for the past few days. She just smiled even wider and said, "Welcome back, my son. I knew you'd be back." And the worst part? Kunle knew she was right, because no matter how hard he'd fought it, no matter how much he'd tried to resist, he was already completely hooked. Driven to desperation, Kunle decided to visit an old babalawo, herbalist, way out in a place called Ipe, still in Lagos. Kunle had never been to Ipe before, and honestly, he never wanted to go. The roads were awful, the air smelled like burning wood, and the farther he went, the more the buildings seemed to dissolve into thick bushes and an unsettling silence. The Danfo minibus driver who'd taken him there had given him a weird look when Kunle told him where he wanted to go. "You sure you want to go there?" the driver had asked, staring at him through the rearview mirror. Kunle just nodded, clutching his phone tightly, even though he barely had any signal. The driver didn't say anything else. He just grunted, dropped Kunle off at the last stop, and drove away without even a backward glance. Now, standing alone in front of a mud house, Kunle wasn't so sure this was such a great idea. But he was desperate, too desperate to turn back now. Before Kunle could even knock, the door creaked open. A man stood there, old and hunched over, with deep lines etched into his dark skin. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied Kunle for what felt like forever before he finally stepped aside. "Come in." Kunle hesitated for a moment, then forced himself to step inside. The room was dimly lit, and the air was thick with a smell of burning herbs. Strange symbols were painted all over the wooden walls, and in the middle of the room, on a small mat, sat an iron bowl filled with a dark, bubbling liquid. The old man sat cross-legged on the floor and gestured for Kunle to do the same. "Speak," he said simply. Kunle swallowed hard and Dee told him everything. The old man listened without saying a word, his expression unreadable. But when Kunle finally finished, the man nodded slowly. "You are cursed." Kunle's breath caught in his throat. "Cursed? But I didn't do anything." "Mama Put's food is not ordinary," the old man continued, his voice calm but firm. "It is bound by something unnatural, and you, like many others, have fallen under its hold." Kunle's stomach churned. "But how?" The old man stirred the bowl, watching the smoke curl into strange shakes. "Her urine. It is not just urine." "What do you mean?" "It is a binding spell," the old man said. "A spell that ties the soul of whoever consumes it to her." Kunle felt a wave of nausea wash over him. This was even worse than he'd imagined. He thought it might be some simple juju. But this was something else entirely. "How do I break it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old man sighed and shook his head sadly. Then he looked Kunle straight in the eye and said, "You must make her eat her own food." Kunle froze. A cold shiver ran down his spine. "Make her eat her own food?" he repeated, dumbfounded. The old man nodded, and that's when it really hit Kunle. He'd worked at Mama Put's for months. He'd seen her cook, serve, even pack up leftovers for customers. But one thing he'd never seen, not even once, was Mama Put actually eating her own food. His mouth went dry. "She never eats it," he murmured, more to himself than to the old man. The old man didn't reply. Didn't need to. Deep down, Kunle already knew the truth. There isn't Dhaka at this stop. It's not time to pause and lay for a while before people can do that. Every action or step is in order to build up an inventory, one with the right people. Or are these watching this and benevolent, conforming to plans, and even better, if you will let us know? He needed a plan, and whatever he was going to do, he had to do it soon, because the cravings were getting worse. He knew if he didn't break free now, he never would. Kunle barely slept that night. He lay on his spring bed, staring up at the ceiling, his mind spinning. His body was weak. He hadn't eaten properly in days. Nothing satisfied him anymore, except the thought of going back to Mama Put's. The cravings were unbearable, but he knew if he went back without a plan, he'd be trapped forever. The next day, which was a Saturday, the only day Kunle worked both morning and afternoon shifts, he walked into the restaurant as if nothing was wrong. The air was thick with the familiar smell of agusi and jollof rice, but now it just made his stomach churn. Mama Put was already behind the counter, her colorful wrapper tied tight around her waist, her strong arm stirring a steaming pot of a bono soup. She saw Kunle and grinned, showing off her gap teeth. "Ah, my boy, you're looking better. You weren't here yesterday." Kunle forced a smile. "Yeah, Mama, I wasn't feeling so good, but I'm okay now." She scoffed. "Of course, you're not okay. You haven't eaten my food. Come, let me give you a little bit." Kunle's throat tightened. "Later, Mama. Let me serve the customers first." She nodded and turned back to her pot. Good. He had some time. Now he just had to wait for the perfect moment. Lunch hour was complete chaos. The small restaurant was packed with people. Customers were shouting out their orders. And orders. Bowls were clanging. The air was filled with loud laughter and the sizzling of frying meat. Mama Put was as busy as ever, darting from one pot to another, dishing out food with unbelievable speed. And that's when Kunle saw it. Her water bottle. A small, blue plastic bottle. The same one she always carried around. She never drank from the cups or sachet water like everyone else. Always her own bottle. This was it. This was his chance. Kunle glanced around the room. Everyone was too busy stuffing their faces to notice him. Heart pounding in his chest, he carefully unscrewed the cap of her water bottle and poured in a spoonful of soup from the large metal pot. Kunle stepped back and wiped high, sweaty palms on his jeans. Now all he could do was wait. Seconds turned into minutes. Minutes turned into hours. Mama Put went about her business as usual, laughing, shouting at customers, barking orders at Kunle. And then it happened. She reached for her water bottle, uncapped it, tilted it to her lips, took a sip, and instantly vanished. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Screams filled the air. Plates crashed to the ground. Customers leaped to their feet and ran for the doors, their eyes wide with terror. "Where's Mama Put?" someone shouted. "She was just standing here." "Jesus Christ! She's not human," another cried as they fled. Kunle stood frozen in the middle of it all, his heart hammering in his chest. He had done it. He had broken the curse. But the nightmare was far from over, because that's when the real horror began. For weeks, nobody could eat properly. Restaurants all over Ikorodu were deserted. No matter what they tried, no other food satisfied them. Not jollof rice, not amala, not even their mother's home-cooked meals. It was like their bodies had forgotten what real food tasted like. But slowly, painfully, the spell began to wear off. Their appetites returned. Food tasted normal again. Life went on. But Mama Put's shop remained closed, abandoned. And to this day, nobody knows who she was, where she came from, or where she went. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting stories.